There we go. Hi, everybody. We are live and recording on Friday, January 29th. So welcome. We've got still figuring a lot of this stuff out because I selected the option to let people join as they came in, and it seems I still have to admit people. So I am still getting used to this. There we go. So yeah. Not sure why, but when I create the meeting and select it, it somehow goes to Pacific time, and then I have to change it. So I'm trying to figure it out. Bear with me. I'll get it. Might be the 5th or 6th time. But welcome to Fire Away Friday. We're going to continually have people coming on. But again, the idea with Fire Away Friday is that the head coach, me, would go through a few things, frequently asked questions or frequent topics that come up in the world of swimming as it pertains to swim clubs. And I thought, you know, our first couple of videos, the first one I put out to the membership was about COVID safety. The second one I put out was about MAC culture. And then we started this past week with the What's Up Wednesdays, and we had Monday meetings with the coaches and the swimmers. So I think it's off to a good start. We certainly have had some really good conversations, and Wednesday's discussion with Tessa Chipuha was fantastic as well. So I think you're seeing a lot of good value here. Kind of this episode, I wanted to touch on 3 different things. One was looking to the future. You know, we're very much focused on the present and what's happening, and kind of we're treading water, pardon the pun, while we're trying to get through this difficult time. But I think it's also important that we keep looking to the future, because one way or another we're going to work through this and get through the other end and look back on this going, remember when? Hopefully that'll be shorter rather than a long time from now. So looking at the future for our athletes, one is that we'll have a gradual return. Okay, I don't think you should expect that the doors will be wide open, everybody can come back at the same time. I think it'll be a very structured, almost reversal of where we came from to lead to this point. I think we'll go back in the same manner. It will be a process where you can anticipate that people will be a little bit anxious. They'll be strict on the rules, maybe not that patient with us. And I think we just need to realize that everybody's really concerned for good reason, but step by step we'll get there. So I think that gradual return, we'll see a reversing of the colors, the color system they laid out, and then we'll get to the point where every day, you know, we'll have our check-ins, we'll have our temperature, and then slowly we'll be able to start doing some dry land in person together at some point, whether it's smaller numbers at first and then getting to bigger numbers. And then we'll get to the part where we're back training. We'll get to a point where we'll stand up and do in-house time trial or an in-house dual meet. And then we'll move through those kind of phases that Swim Ontario has already prepared with, moving from a time trial to a dual meet. And then, you know, we're already starting to talk about in June, a heats and finals meet that Swim Canada is going to be hosting. I'm not sure the details, if that's going to be open to everybody or if it'll be by invite, but that's what they're saying. So as usual, everything changes every week, but that's what they're saying right now. And then once we get through that, you know, we can look at some sort of homeostasis and kind of move forward. Okay. The second thing I wanted to talk about today was about when we get to the point where parents are allowed to come in and watch practice, and kind of the facility opens, and they'll still have their protocols. I'm sure they'll have spaces marked out to keep people separated. similar to maybe 2 months ago in hockey. You were allowed in the arena, one parent per family, and they had X's on the floor to be able to stand. So I'm going to kind of carry a conversation forward from my son's hockey coach, and his coach is strict the same way that I am, but he had a really good thing in the registration package. And before I go any further with the story, I think it's important we all recognize that everybody is excited, everybody wants to help, everybody wants to contribute to their child's success. And what I'm going to talk about today is how to do that in the right way. Because there are places that when parents get onto deck or get onto the viewing area, their excitement kind of carries them away to a point where it becomes a distraction for the swimmer and the coaches. I know when I was teaching 10 and unders, I used to ask the parents to leave the pool deck, especially if they were learning to swim, because they would always be keeping an eye on where mom and dad were, and they weren't really engaged in what I was trying to teach them. As soon as the first 5 minutes of crying was over after the parents left, then we could really get things done. You had their attention, and to a lesser extent, that philosophy still applies. When we open the doors, parents are allowed to come into the stands. There'll be a few things that will require from parents. And one is that we're encouraging you to watch, we're encouraging you to enjoy the experience. But what we can't have is we can't have people that are videotaping and then giving corrective feedback. We can't have parents that are shouting down to their kids. We can't have interaction between the coaches and the parents in the stand. We got to respect the fact that the coach-athlete dynamic is important. We've got them for a brief period of time. We want their attention to be on us. And so certainly take video for your enjoyment, but make sure that you're not going home and going through that video with your athletes. The reason I say that, and again, I know your intention is in all the best ways, but what it does is it creates a little bit of a problem where parents are giving their perspective and it kind of comes into the coaching zone. We don't want to create a situation where the parents and the coaches are getting in between with the athlete. We want a really clear communication that all the coaching, technical, physiological side, all the time we spend on deck is coach-athlete, supported by the parents. Because I'll tell you, if I'm saying one thing and the parent's saying another thing, a lot of times the athletes, they really want to please the parents. So it becomes difficult and they get torn. So for clarity, we need to leave the instruction and the coaching to the coaches. And parents, you're the number one people behind them, right? You're the support staff. You do the meals, you drive, you volunteer, you're doing everything. But I can tell you that there was a survey done by USA Swimming, and the number one thing that kids hated the most was the drive home, the questions, the talk about swimming, that was one of the things that they disliked the most. And I've even been guilty of it myself, talking to Daniel about his hockey. And you can tell really quickly when he just wants to be talking about other things or keep it simple. And, I really want to know, I really want to ask questions, and sometimes you just need to back off. So with regards to parents coming into the stands, certainly, we want all the good things that come with that. You get to enjoy that experience. You get to see the coaches in action. You get to see what your child's doing, watch their improvement. And on the other side, we have to make sure that environment is very positive. Okay, one of the things we won't allow is, if there becomes negative talk in the stands, people that start criticizing the coaching or not enough of this, not enough of that. And I go back to my son's hockey. We had to sign an agreement before we started, and it was really simple that if there was any negative talk or criticism of the coaches or, what positions they did or what style they played, it was really, really clear. If that's happening in the stands or out in the lobby, your membership is terminated without a refund. And it was really clear. My son's 9. So it was very clear that there was a time and place for parents to meet with coaches to ask questions, which is really different than questioning. I encourage questions. We need questions. We need to keep that communication open and going, but just meant that it's not questioning. We need to keep the lines of communication open and be clear and have a time. So for example, don't kind of trap a coach coming out of practice and say, oh, I just need to talk to you about these few things. They've got places to go, they've got families, they may have appointments, and they're not prepared for the discussion. It might just kind of set them back. So in terms of that kind of thing, email, ask for a time that's mutually beneficial for both parties to meet, and then go through and kind of have that discussion. Anyway, I back up. The whole point of this discussion is about parents in the stands when we get to that point, and how I want that, and I want the encouragement, I want the positivity, I want the videoing, so you can be proud of what your child's doing and what we're doing on deck. We have had periods of time in the past where we've had to ask parents to leave because they just couldn't help themselves with waving at their kids and telling them to do this in their stroke. Be very, very careful with that, because you don't want to create that conflict between your athlete and your coach where the athlete's really not sure, just a sec, your athlete's not sure who to take advice from, because you're mom and dad, right? You're number one. We're the backup crew to you. So if we can keep that really clear, it's going to do wonders. So moving forward with that, that was one main thing I wanted to talk about. And as I understand, there has been some of that in the past where we have had maybe some of that dialogue from the stands to the deck. So I don't want to get to the point where we're talking about those things and having to remove people from practice. I think it's just a simple communication tool that, you respect what's going on deck and with the athletes, and the athletes know that their time on the deck is to be focused on swimming and on the coaches. One last thing with that document with Daniel playing hockey was that if they're in a tournament or playing games and they find that the hockey player is looking up to the stands, to the parents to look for advice or feedback or whatever, they're benched for two other shifts, because they want the focus on what the coaches are telling them, what their teammates are doing, what's going on the ice. So it's very similar kind of philosophy. Okay. That's number 2. Number 3 was the idea of group moves or group placements. This will come out kind of in a document form later on, but I wanted to throw that out there because it's always a bone of contention, or it's always something that pops up in discussion in every club all around the world, is group moves. We use a combination of objective criteria with subjective license. The objective criteria is being worked out as we're going through the season. Obviously, we haven't been able to get very much data and kind of find some sort of homeostasis through this period. But once we get into the regular rhythm of things, we'll be able to see this group is going to be around this area with an entry and an exit kind of protocol, or exit points and entry points. We started doing this before we had to break up because of COVID and the lockdown. And we started to do things where we're seeing where the groups are, we're evaluating kick levels, we're evaluating IM training sets, and coaches, we would meet and talk about those things, have the sets, have the groups do the sets, come back next week, and we'd say, okay, well, this needs to be adjusted, this needs to be adjusted. So the idea is that we'll get to a point where we have a really firm understanding of what it takes to move into this group, just purely objective. They can kick this amount on this time. They can do this IM set on this interval. They can do this freestyle set holding this stroke count. Their attendance, we won't consider people for moving up if they're below 85%. The reason for that is if you can't maximize the schedule that you're currently on, it makes no sense to move on to a greater training schedule if you can't maximize the one that you're at now. So the general rule of thumb would be 90 to 95% attendance of the current level before we'd look at moving them on. Okay, other objective criteria other than attendance, other than training sets, we do look at swimming performance, but it's not the first and foremost thing. And that's really hard for some people to understand. It may be true that you have people that can move from this wall to that wall and back faster than the others, but they may not have all the components that fit for training in this group. The groups are designed with a certain training focus and a training load and a training duration, and there's certain content that we put into that they need to be able to do. So for example, you may have an 8-year-old girl that's exceptionally fast, but they may be able to keep up with a group up here, But if you push too much too fast, they miss certain developmental milestones. They miss certain technical development milestones. And it puts them into a situation where, well, if they're 8 swimming 6 times a week, how many are they going to swim when they're a year older? Now you're at 7 workouts a week. So by the time they're 10 and 11, they're swimming what, 9, 10 times a week? What happens when they're 13? 13 workouts a week? Well, what happens when they're 16, 21? It just doesn't make sense. So you've got to really be careful with the appropriate amount of training stimulus when they're ready and when we think that it's going to best benefit them. Further to that, hi Benny. Further to that, there's something called training age versus chronological age. Okay, there's another one too, but those are the big two that we look at. And the chronological age is just how long they've been alive, right? How many years they've been on the planet. The training age has to do with how many years they've actually been swimming and training. We have to take those into consideration because some people start later or earlier than others. So we do take into account those kind of things. The objective criteria can be nailed down to be pretty specific, right? The subjective criteria are all the things that you can't really nail down. It's not something you can really keep track of. It's things like coachability, okay? It's attitude, it's work ethic, right? It's are they a student of the sport? Are they willing to be athletes that change? Are they team players, right? Can you count on them that if we go to a swim meet and they're on a relay, they're not going to scratch on Sunday night because only their relay made the finals? Okay, so I have held people back out of groups. In fact, in my previous club, we didn't have a spot for this athlete in the entire club because the person would never come back for relays. He wouldn't come back if he was first alternate. He wouldn't. So it was always a very selfish approach, and we could never count on him. So we've had people show up for relays, couldn't swim the relay because this guy didn't want to come. So we weren't going to hold a spot for him. We're not there at that point, but I think that's where we're heading. We want to have a team of athletes that are supportive and, we can count on them. So this subjective criteria often comes into play when the training element is good, but maybe they're not emotionally mature enough to handle 7 workouts a week. Maybe they can't handle the school swimming combination. Maybe they're not mature enough to be able to manage their time to be able to get that schoolwork done and still be able, to come to early morning practice. And you can do it. I've done it. I've swam 10 times a week when I was 14 years old, and I was able to get all my schoolwork in. And I also know people in universities that became doctors that still swam at an international level and graduated. So it can be done. It's a matter of, and this is the beautiful thing about swimming, is it forces the athlete and the parents at a younger age to be able to really manage their time well. And if we stick with this is the really, really important thing that influences these athletes for the rest of their life. And those athletes that are listening, you already are on this track, okay? So group moves, although can be contentious and people can go through and, say my child has 5 regional A times and this person only has 3, why did they get moved up over them? There's a lot that goes into it. Not only the objective criteria, but the subjective license in that. And I'll just finish off with saying, it never benefits the coaches to hold kids back unnecessarily. It's always in our favor, in the clubs and in the coach, and moving people up is usually always in our favor, but we want to do it so that it's at the athlete's best interest. Not necessarily the parents or the athlete's greatest desire, but when it's appropriate for them. Because I'll tell you, the hardest thing in the world is moving someone down. If they find it's too much, they can't do it, right? We gave them too much too soon. They get injured, they get discouraged, right? I'd rather have someone stay in a group and become a leader in the lane and a leader in the group and move them up 3 or 4 months later so that they're really ready to sink their teeth into that next level and compete with those athletes rather than move up and get trounced. It's always a situation we want to get them in a position to succeed. Okay, last 20, 30 seconds and I'll turn it over to questions. I'll give you one example. One of my assistant coaches had a really hard time with these two boys, getting them to do 5 underwater kicks off the wall in training. They'd only do 1 or 2, and especially if the set got hard, they'd do almost none. And we had it as a requirement in our group moves. To get into my group, you had to be able to hold 5 underwaters regardless. Some people moved up. These 2 gentlemen didn't, one of which was the president's son. No issues. Parents supported us. Yep, coaches know what they're doing. This is in the athlete's best interest. 3 months later, those 2 boys moved up. They both made the national championships. One went on to win a national medal, and the other one went on to represent Canada at the Pan Pacific Games. Right? But we were diligent, we were patient, we held a high standard, and once they made it, they came through with flying colors. So when we talk about group moves, just keep that in mind. I'll put this into document form. I already have it a bit in document form, but more detailed. But remember that there are many things that contribute to that. The objective criteria, the subjective license, the athlete's chronological and biological age we consider, okay? And then we go from there. But at the end of the day, we're always wanting to do what's best for the athlete. We don't want to hold an athlete back and have them swim slow. I mean, that doesn't benefit anybody. Parents are upset, child's not happy, makes us look bad, like the kids are swimming slow. So if we're holding someone back, it's for a really good reason. And I wouldn't actually say it's holding them back. It's keeping them in the appropriate place, to build confidence so that when they move to the next level, they can be successful. All right. Load up your questions, folks. See, we've got 55 people on the call. Gonna be too easy on me? No questions? Gotta have some. Come on, my swimmers out there, ask me anything and something, we'll get the ball rolling. What do you think are the top 3 characteristics of a swimmer? All right, now we got a couple questions coming in. Top 3 characteristics of a swimmer. Just making sure I read it right because it says of a swimmer coach. Are you saying, what do you think are the top 3 characteristics, coach, of a swimmer? Okay, got it. Well, number 1 is consistency, right? The hallmark of champions is consistency. They have to be able to reliably show up, have a good attention, have good work ethic, right? Consistently be there. And the argument is, you know, if you put a dollar a day every day for the next couple of years, it's much better than, you know, $5 every 2 weeks and, you know, $10 here, $10. It's more about the consistency factor. That would be the number 1 characteristic. Number 2 is resiliency. Resiliency, because you can't succeed without failure, right? You can march along for a certain while, but then inevitably you're going to reach some sort of challenge or failure. And that's your doorway to the next level of success. Okay, if you're not resilient, you learn how to give up really quickly. You think things are too hard. You think in terms of have to instead of want to. So the resiliency piece is really important because you're going to go through all sorts of body changes. You're going to change schools. You're going to change relationships. There's tons of adversity coming your way. And then I think the third one you can't get away from is toughness, grit. Next question. What place does open water swimming have in the MAC program? Really good question. I love open water. I think it's a really good supplement to pool swimming. I think every swimmer I've taken on open water, it's made them better in the pool for countless reasons. When you get into high level open water, very competitive world level open water, that's a really different show. It's extremely competitive and cutthroat. I was telling someone the other day, we went to a Grand Prix meet down in Mexico a few years ago, and a lot of the South Americans were there, and they get paid. Their livelihood is how well they do in open water, and they are vicious. climb over you, scratch you, pull your feet, kick. It's a different world. So open water sure does have an element of challenging toughness to it. But I think in terms of the MAC program, there's two things. One, every athlete can benefit from it. I think in a number of ways. It makes you better in the pool. It's a great experience to go and take in. It's totally different than pool swimming where you can't see the bottom. Things change all the time. You've got to battle the wind, the sun, dehydration, drifting off course. It's really, really cool. And you come back to the pool with an appreciation of that. The other thing is it's tremendous for helping your distance swimming. A 1500 pales in comparison to doing a 10K open water. Because you don't really swim a 10K in open water, you swim 12, 13K because you're swimming up waves and down waves, you're swimming sideways, going off track, you're coming back here. Then you get into a pool and you go straight up and straight down, 1500, it's over before you know it. So I think it has a really big place in the future for the MAC senior swimmers because two things. One, I think it's really good if we can add it onto a training camp component. And number two, it can be a reward and recognition program for the swimmers that are specializing in the 4, 8, and 15 to be able to go and do those kind of activities, especially now that it's an Olympic event. Would you say that between kick and pull, there is one that is more important? Well, obviously at the highest levels, you have to be good at both. But we are seeing that there are certain trends. So for example, in the men's short course 200 breaststroke, if you go back and look at the ISL, the winners are taking 1 to 2 strokes on the first 25. Then they're going 3, 3, 4, 5, and then the last 25, they might take 11 or something like that. It's a really different, completely different game than long course. The long course 200 breaststroke is about 150 meters of leg dominant gliding at the fastest possible rhythm. And then the last 50, it jacks up. The 100 breaststroke, very arm dominant, extremely, extremely strong arms. Anything kind of over 100 meters, you've got a really great blend of arms and legs. If you're a poor kicker and you can't really do underwater kicking, I'm sorry to tell you, but your career as a sprint 50 freestyle or a 50 backstroker is going to be very limited because underwater kicking is the 5th stroke. It is so integral. And when you can see people that can perform that skill at a high level, you have no chance. Now, personally improving in the 50 free, you can do that forever. But I'm talking about competing, you need to be really good on your legs. Keep in mind the other reason that we do a heck of a lot of leg work is that they're the biggest muscles in your body, and they take up the most oxygen. So if they're unfit, your oxygen is going to be used up really quickly, and now you're going to go into lactic acidosis and tighten up. So I'm not sure I really answered your question, Tom, but I think it's a good starting point to look at where you're weakest and understand that's your greatest area that you can get better in. Still focus on your strengths, but develop your weaknesses. How are time standards central, provincial, nationally determined? Well, depends on who's doing them, but usually it's to control the size of the meet. They'll do time standards. In the past, they've taken them off a certain place. So for example, if you wanted no more than 10 heats of the 50 free and 8 heats of the 100, 6 of the 200, and so you would go back over the history of the meets year after year, and you would get those results and kind of get an average. So in the same way that I can tell you that over the last 5 Olympics, it's taken about 208 to make the top 8 at the Olympics in the 200 fly for women. Those statistics are pretty reliable. They go back and look at those averages and then find out what time standard will give them a certain number of people in that meet. They're even doing the 10 minutes already. We're on the 10-minute warning. Um, a lot of times when they're trying to keep the meet small, those time standards will be really, really difficult. But the provincial ones, they look at over the course of history, and then try to find that average. Anybody else? Latest update on the Markham Pan Am Center is we're in a holding pattern. It's not going to be open, we don't think, in the month of February. But again, things can change on a weekly basis. As of now, they've reached out to us and said, you know, we're eager to have you back when it's the appropriate time. But right now, we don't have a hard and fast date. Any other questions before we sign off? I hope I was relatively clear in talking about the future of how things look, the group move kind of process and thought process, as well as the other thing I talked about. Oh, in the viewing room, the viewing area, parents in the viewing area. So I will tell you that, you know, just ending on that note, it's really important that we have people that are super positive in the stands. You've got to talk the talk and promote our brand. Okay, if you have a question or a concern, you're only making our club worse if you're complaining about it in some private chat or in the stands or in the hallway. Just come and talk to us. At the end of the day, you may not like the answer that you get, but I think it's the only fair way to address it. And also, we have to think about the club. We want to make sure that, you know, we're celebrating all the things that we love and enjoy, and kind of tell 10 people when you're happy and come and tell me when you're not, right? If it's a swimming technical program, anything water related, talk to me. If it's kind of detail oriented with accounts or the office, contact Kelly. If it's board related, which has everything to do with kind of the management of the club, policies and procedures, then you would talk to the board. Okay, one more question. How can we improve specific drills like dolphin kick at home? Well, number one would be ankle flexibility. If you guys kneel down and you put your butt on your heels and you lean back, have your toes slightly pointed in, and bring your knees off the ground, put a little pressure, hold that for 15 seconds, go out. You can do that while you're watching TV for a half an hour, right? Go 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, and just keep working on that. You have to have some elasticity and some flexibility through those ankles, through the toes. I think the other thing too is just getting stronger in your legs. Make sure that you guys are doing the dry land. Make sure that you're running, climbing stairs. Don't take an elevator, climb the stairs. The other thing that's really important with that is keeping up on your abs, keeping up on your core work. Okay, the strength of your core ties right into your hip flexors, right out through your legs. A weak core will have a weak dolphin kick. All right, if there are any other questions, I want to wish you guys a great weekend. We're coming to the end of January, and this weekend, tomorrow, we will have a test event at the Pan Am pool where we're getting a few people up and racing. I'm going to try to record a couple of those and send them out for you guys, just to kind of get a little taste of swimming that's going on right now. Hopefully they'll publish the results and we'll be able to see what people are doing. But other than that, guys, keep it up, stay on your dry land, keep positive, and keep talking to each other. Any questions after the broadcast, fire away at Coach Sean at markhamaquaticclub.com. Bye, guys.